Shalom.
How's everybody doing? As we all know, today is the first day of the Feast of Dedication, also known as the Feast of Lights or the Feast of Restoration, right? So we're going to be doing a lesson on that on the next Sabbath. This week we had a lesson plan that's speaking more so to the holiday that just passed. Although it passed and we weren't able to do it the day before or the day of, it's still a relatively important topic to touch on, mainly for the fact that the same things that they did to our people back then in conquesting at that time is the same initiatives that they're using today, right? The same thing. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to break down certain things, and we're going to make sure that there's a clear understanding as to not only the history behind what happened in Thanksgiving, which is known, but also the religious history behind Thanksgiving. A lot of people don't know that Thanksgiving is a religious holiday as opposed to just a day that you celebrate. A lot of people think that it's just a family day. Now, this it has a lot of religious overtones and a history behind what we saw as far as, the average history of the Pilgrims and the Indian story that we're often told. Right. So without any further ado, I am Bishop Tazadat.
That was Nathaniel
of the House of Judah International Fellowship Church. And hey, let's get into it, right? So first and foremost, we want to
direct.
Yes, that's what head in that direction. Okay. Before we get into the lesson, we wanted to make sure that we directed people back to the lesson that we did the week prior. Stay focused, right? That was a really, really timely and important lesson. We have a clip here, but after we finish here, or at some point when you have time, make sure you go back and check out that lesson. It's a really deep and powerful lesson, very timely. So without any further ado, we can roll a clip.
Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood.
How many times have you heard that? I bet you're tired of hearing that. But we're going to go in a different direction with this scripture today, read.
But against principalities.
Read.
Against powers. Against rulers of darkness of this world.
Against the rulers of darkness of this world. Right? Read.
Against spiritual wickedness in high places. The one thing that we must recognize in this scripture is that it is not exclusive to things we are not privy of seeing. Right? A lot of people look at this scripture and say, well, that means that our battle is only with things that we cannot see. So don't think that because our battle is spiritual that it cannot manifest itself in the physical. How does it manifest itself in the spiritual and in the physical? People, right? Because even though it is not only speaking of things that we are not privy to seeing, but also things and people that they place in front of us. Right? So puppets, presidents, queens, and other rulers around the world, right? It's speaking of these people too. That's why it says against rulers of darkness of this world. Right? Against spiritual wickedness in high places. There's two aspects to this wickedness. And just because our battle is against the spiritual doesn't mean that wickedness doesn't manifest itself in the physical. Right? We must understand that these men and women in these powerful positions are acting as puppets for the principalities operating behind them. This is why, right? This is why leaders and dictators come and go. They come and go. They die, a new one comes up. They die, a new one comes up. Or in our case, a president's elected, he leaves office. Another president's elected, he leaves office. But guess what? The same agendas get done. Leaders die, principalities remain. That means that the ideas of the spirits that are operating behind them are still operating. We are battling an age-old agenda against Satan and his wicked governments. The same government that we are fighting now is the same racist government that existed in Rome. It's the same racist government that existed in Greece. It's the same wicked government that existed in Babylon and Assyria and Persia. Right? These are the same wicked governments and the same spirit operating behind these governments. Right? So voting within the same government of Satan's puppets has not benefited our people. It's like going into a closet, right? And picking which hand puppet you want. You want a black one or a white one? But guess what? The hand on the inside of that puppet is the same exact hand that's been with all the rest of them. Come on. So you get to pick your puppet. You think you get to pick your puppet at least. You're like, go ahead. We got 3 puppets for you guys this year. Which one you want? And you expect our people to benefit from that? The agenda has been against our people, has been to fight God's chosen from the beginning. And you expect that to change? 4. Ezekiel was sent to speak to the king of Tyrus, but he's not speaking directly to the king of Tyrus. He's speaking to the spirit that's operating behind Tyrus. But people are looking at the king of Tyrus and thinks that these are his wicked actions, when it's actually Satan moving him like a puppet. This is Satan's government. That's why he said, thou hast been in the Garden of Eden. He's not speaking to the king of Tyrus. He's speaking to the spirit behind Tyrus. He's speaking directly to Samael, Lucifer. So all right. Okay. So that particular part that particular clip that Elder put together actually ties directly into what we're going to be going into, and similar to today, right? How leadership comes and goes and governments come and go, but yet the initiative remains the same. The initiative towards the children of Israel, gearing towards the children of Israel, remains the same, right? Because even when we look back into history, right? And I said this in the lesson on last week in Stay Focused, that our people have always minded our own business. We stayed to ourselves. We never bothered anybody. But yet, of all the nations that the country and power could attack at time, they always seemed to choose us. It was for some reason you have a ton of other people around Earth that they could go and bother, who's minding their own business, but yet every time they choose us, and the initiatives always come back around to us. And what we're going to find is that our people, the Gadites, the Native Americans here in the U.S., fell to that same thing, right? There's this idea that it wasn't common knowledge that the lost tribes were lost, right? These are the things that were common knowledge back then. People knew of the Jews. People knew who the Jews were, right? They also knew that there were lost tribes. They also knew that there were people in the Americas. Prior to the Pilgrims arriving in the U.S., in the Americas at that time, there had been previous trips there to and from. In fact, they had even captured slaves of Native Americans and taken them back to Europe. That's where Sakanto came from, the one who spoke English. He was taken as a slave back to England and came back to the U.S., back to the America. So them knowing that people was there, that wasn't something that they weren't familiar with. Right. So the conquest of our people in that time wasn't anything new.
They had already, in the times when the U.S. was just beginning to start their foreign relations with the Native Americans, they had already conquered the island of Hispaniola, right?
Right.
In the trans-Pacific slave trade. So they knew where the people are and they knew who they were.
Right.
That's why their intentions at that point they were never clean.
Right.
Their intentions going in were never clean. There's also a misconception that the people who were going there were separatists, that they wanted to practice religious freedom. Did you know that less than half of the people who came on the Mayflower were separatists? Less than half. So majority of them weren't searching for religious freedom. They needed land. They were trying to profit off of the land that was there. But if they didn't have the help of the Native Americans in that landscape, then the same thing that happened to Jamestown would have happened again at Plymouth Rock.
Right. Right.
Right? They would have been wiped out. So what did they need to do? They needed to create a treaty with the Native Americans and get them to teach them how it is that they survive on this landscape, how they survive in this terrain. But then once you have what you need from them, now they're just impeding on your land, your new land. Because remember, the concept of the Native Americans and land was, well, it's everybody's land, we share it. So nobody has a specific plot of land that's their own, right? And keep in mind, that's the same way the Israelites operated. We had land, but if the poor came by and they needed to eat, they were free to eat from what we left in the groves, right? So that's like the same way that the natives practiced it. So when pilgrims come in and they say, this is my plot of land, now you're a disturbance. Now you're a gnat, right? So now it's a situation where, okay, so then it's not necessary that we keep them around. And, we've already weakened them with all the diseases that we brought. Don't get rid of them. Right? And keep in mind, these are the same initiatives that are being used to oppress and destroy our people today through vaccinations. They say, oh, well, back then they said, hey, here's some blankets. You must be cold. Now they're saying, oh, your baby might get sick. So you know what? We need to pump you full of 5 or 6 different vaccines just to make sure that you don't get sick. Right? Wow. The same initiatives that were practiced then are still being practiced today. Right?
Right.
Disproportionately amongst the children of Israel, even to this day. Upon the arrival of the Europeans, not only did they nearly wipe out the Wampanoag people, but they also sent multiple Native American tribes into complete extinction.
Yeah.
Over 60 Native American tribes within that century went extinct.
Wow.
Right? And some say that the original that going there, their intentions weren't to fight the Native Americans. Yet, in a song that was written in that time, written by an anonymous writer, which is still sung to this day by Puritans and Catholics, and some Catholics, a song called "We Gather Together," which was speaking about the war that was impending from the time that they arrived, and them giving thanks to God for the destruction of their enemies. And they say that this particular holiday isn't religious. Right? They say that it's not religious. But Thanksgivings back then were practiced in church. And they did prayers and rituals to honor their victory over the Native Americans, who they knew were Israelites. Because keep in mind, Christopher Columbus knew who he was looking for when he went.
Right.
The only reason he knew that there was land on this side of the planet was because he was reading from the book of Esdras. He read from the calculations of Esdras. That's a fact. You can look that up yourself.
Right.
He was reading the Bible to figure out where our people were. And you know what? We're going to do the same thing today. We're going to start off by proving who the Native Americans are according to the Bible. First, I want to start out with going into the template of the 12 patriarchs, right?
Mm-hmm.
This, and I'm going to go specifically in the 12 patriarchs to Naphtali, right? Because Naphtali, he was a unique one of our forefathers. He not only was he a physician, so he knew the body and the sciences involving the body, but he also had prophetic dreams, and he was really a jack of all trades in a lot of ways, right? Mm-hmm. So the same dreams that Joseph would have concerning him in the birthright were the same dreams in a sense that Naphtali was having concerning the destiny of the children of Israel. Mm-hmm. So he was given prophetic dreams as to knowing that Judah would be the king and that Levi would be the priest. But he also had a dream about something else. If you go to Naphtali and go to chapter 6, it says here, and again, after 7 days, I saw our father Jacob standing by the sea of Jamnia. Now, if you don't know where Jamnia is, if you look at the ancient maps of Israel, you'll see Joppa in the bottom area. It's a port in the bottom area of the northern kingdom. Mm-hmm. So just below that, about 7 miles south of Joppa, was the Jamnia harbor. So this is where the ships were held, right? This is the same place that was used by the 10 tribes when they decided to leave the land of Israel. So he's having a prophetic dream right now, right? He says he saw our father Jacob standing by the sea of Jamnia, where we were with him. So his brothers were with him. And behold, there came a ship sailing by without sailors or pilot, and it was written upon the ship of Jacob. And our father said to us, let us embark on our ship. And he had gone aboard, and there arose a vehement storm and a mighty tempest of wind. And our father, who was holding the helm, departed from us. And we, being tossed with the tempest, were borne along the sea. And the ship was filled with water and was pounded by mighty waves until it was broken up. And when Joseph had fled away upon a little boat, and we were divided upon 9 planks, Levi and Judah were together. Keep that in mind. Levi and Judah were together, right? It says here, and we were all scattered unto the ends of the earth. And Levi girt about with the sackcloth, prayed for us unto the Most High. And the storm ceased, and the ship reached the land as it were at peace. And our father came, and we all rejoiced with one accord. Chapter 7. These 2 dreams I told my father, and he said to me, these must be fulfilled in their season. After that, Israel has endured many things. Then my father said unto me, I believe God that Joseph liveth, and I see always that the Most High have numbered him with you. Right? So at this point, according to by seeing Naphtali's dream, Jacob knew that his son had to be alive. He said, every prophetic dream that you're having about you and your brothers, Joseph is present. How can he be dead when these are future prophecies of him being involved in our plight, in our captivities, in our scattering? Right? Now, this dream that Naphtali had was concerning the 10 tribes of Israel being scattered across the face of the earth. All the tribes of Israel being scattered across the face of the earth. Judah and Levi, including the tribe of Benjamin, were scattered last. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, where do we see this fulfillment of prophecy in the Bible? The same book, but in the same book that Christopher Columbus was reading. The same book that Christopher Columbus was reading. 2nd Esdras. Let's get that.
2nd Esdras, chapter 13, verse 40.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Osea the king, whom Salmanasar, king of Assyria, led away captive.
Okay, so in the Assyrian captivity, keep in mind, due to the sins of Jeroboam, right? We went over this a couple of weeks ago. Due to the sins of Jeroboam, the northern and the southern kingdom were already split at that time due to the sins of Solomon, right? So Jeroboam, who was a Benjamite, led Israel astray, right, with the golden calves, and made Danite the judges. So due to the sin against the Most High sent the Assyrians against them, right? So Hoshea, the king of the Assyrians, led them away captive, right? Read.
And he carried them over the waters.
Mm-hmm.
And so came they into another land.
And so came they into another land. Now, this isn't the original scattering, but what a lot of people don't know about this particular captivity is what the northern tribes endured during this time. See, the Assyrians were the first nation of people to implement ethnic cleansing, right? So when people talk about why it is that they look different than we do, is we have to understand the history that they went through as separate from the Southern Kingdom, right? We never went through the same ethnic cleansing at that time that our people did there. Not with the same people. So when you look up the Assyrians, when you look up Assyrian people and you look at the features, the facial features that they have, such as their nose, the distance of their eyes, the shape of their eyes, the shapes of their heads, and you look at our people and you were to mix and match the facial features of the two, you would see that they match the same facial features of the Gadites. Right. The nose, how the bridge of their nose has that particular bridge. That's a feature of the Assyrians. The wideness of the wideness of our face, of their face, comes from us. The highness of the cheekbones comes from us, but the eyes don't. Right? They went prior to the captivities that they went through in the modern times, after Christopher Columbus, after Hernan Cortez, and all of these and all of these particular conquestors and Europeans. They went through ethnic cleansing of the Assyrians, right? Read.
Get back to it. Verse 41. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they will leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt.
So they decided, why don't we just leave altogether? Because here in Assyria, we're enduring this, right? And so in Assyria, this is what we're enduring. And if we were to go back to Israel, we would endure even worse, right? So why don't we, for the sake of religious freedom, right? For the sake of religious freedom, why don't we just go into a country where nobody is at all? Right? That was the mindset that they had come to at that point. Now, this is interesting that we see that there, because that's exactly what the Feast of Dedication was about.
Right.
Religious freedom. We are finally able to practice our what we believed in our lifestyle freely.
Right.
But first we had to rededicate the temple to the Most High. Right? So when we look at this particular at what's happening here, we see that in actual history that they went two ways. You had some that went further east towards the areas of deeper into the areas of Asia Minor, and you had others who went down through the Jamnia Harbor. Right? So this is where the scattering begins of those 10 tribes. Read.
Verse 42. That they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood. Now,
what's interesting is that you had multiple nations that even still today are proficient in reading the stars, right? So anytime the Most High places a sign for our people, it's usually in the heavens. It's usually in the sky, right? Now, when you watch movies like, for example, Moana, when they found the first island that they found how? The stars. So it's not by accident that they knew that information and that our people still knew that information as to how they got there, right? So first they had ships, and they took those ships through the narrow passages of the Euphrates River for those who did go through Jamnia, right? For those who went that direction as opposed to going towards Afghanistan and going towards the Afghanistan and Asia Minor area. But you also had those who decided to take the ships, right? So from those ships, the Most High gave them signs and held still the flood, right? Because remember, even with when we go through the testament of the patriarchs with Naphtali, he said that the rain was turbulent, right? That the weather was turbulent, so he had to stay the spring. So it says here that he held still the flood, right? Read.
And held still the flood till they were passed over. Verse 45. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half.
Now, for many who believe that this isn't talking about that this particular scripture isn't talking about America, the argument that they use is it takes much longer than a year and a half to get from the Middle East to America. But that's not the journey. That's not the journey. It says here, for through that country. It doesn't say over the waters. It says through the country. It took a year and a half. So they had already reached their destination. Right? It doesn't say that, oh, it took a year and a half for them to get from the Middle East to the new country. It says that through that country, there was a great way to go, namely a year and a half. So that's the distance that had to be covered from one area to another. Read.
And the same region is called Arsareth.
And the same region is called Arsareth. It took them a year and a half to get through America. It didn't say that it took them a year and a half to get from the Middle East to America. It says through that country, there was a great way to go, namely a year and a half. And the same region is called Arsareth. Arsareth is the region that it took them a year and a half to get through. Right? So for those people who would like to make that argument, you got to read the scripture. You got to read it. It doesn't say it took them a year and a half to get there. That's not possible. But it took them a year and a half to get through Arsareth, right? So here we're seeing the same scattering across the four corners of the earth that we saw from the Testament of Naphtali. Right? So now you have a precept to match with the scripture. So now we have the correct context as to what Esdras chapter 2 verse second Esdras 13 is talking about. We have context. This is a physical traveling, right? Go ahead and get verse 46.
Verse 46. Then dwelt they there until the latter time.
Then dwelt they there to the latter time. Read.
And now when they shall begin to come.
Now, it says that they dwelt there until the latter times. That means that Esdras knows exactly where they are. That means that Christ and the disciples knew exactly where the lost tribes were. Right?
Yep.
They weren't oblivious to where our people were at that time. Why do you think that Paul set up churches in Asia? Why do you think that there's records of the disciples traveling to the New World? There's also records of the North American Indians traveling from North America to Hawaii. That's how the Hawaiians learned the art of being cowboys. So, and that's common history. That's history that we know. But the question would be, how did the Native Americans know where the Hawaiians were? It's because these records tells them where they were, just like the records told Christopher Columbus where they were. Right?
Yep.
So there's no dispute that the 10 tribes were scattered through the Americas and the islands in between. There's no dispute with that. But what about the Native Americans? Let's get Genesis chapter 49, verse 19. What was the prophecy given? Because keep in mind, it says here that they dwelt there until the latter time, right? And in Genesis chapter 49, the Most High, Jacob tells his sons, he says, let me tell you what shall befall you in the last days. So that means that he knows where they'll end up. Because Naphtali told him. Right? So go ahead and read Genesis chapter 49, verse.
Genesis chapter 49, verse 19. Gad, a troop shall overcome him,
A troop shall overcome him. Who is this troop? The cavalry, right? The U.S. cavalry, right? Because keep in mind, it was more than just the Mayflower that came. The Mayflower came first. The cavalry came second. That was the Persian group. They came in with the guns. It says a troop shall overcome him. Read.
But he shall overcome at the last.
But he shall overcome at the last. One thing that we're seeing now is that a lot of the Native Americans who at one point were hidden are now revealing themselves. For example, the Wampanoag people, who we saw an article yesterday where it was said that they no longer exist. But this year, in the year 2020, they've now started to reveal themselves. They're like, hey, we still exist. We're not gone, right? And a lot of the Native Americans who know who they are, mainly the ones up in Canada who fled to Canada, and the ones in Alaska, they're waking up. They're starting to reveal themselves. They're like, hey, y'all thought y'all wiped us out. We still here, right? So they thought that they got rid of all of them. They thought they killed all of them. They thought they exterminated them. But now they're starting to rise up. They're starting to remind people that, hey, we still exist. How do we know that this is them? This is a book called The Lost Tribes and Promised Lands, The Origins of American Racism by Ronald Sanders. Ronald Sanders is a Jew. Ronald Sanders is a Jew, right? He's a Jewish man. And he records the history of not only the North American Indians, but also the natives throughout the rest of the Americas, including the islands of Hispaniola, right? And he records something very interesting within this book concerning the Native Americans, because it was clear from the time that people first arrived in the Americas, when they saw the Native Americans, they knew who they were. Christopher Columbus, when he landed in the island of Hispaniola, he had Jewish translators ready on hand because he was absolutely sure that they were going to be speaking Hebrew. He knew that they would be speaking Hebrew. So when they discovered these lands and they saw the people, they knew exactly who they were. It wasn't a question as to, are these people might be Israelites? They knew. This is chapter 30, a lost tribe discovered in New York. I'm going to start at the second paragraph. It says, upon his return to Cartagena, the Judaizing Montezinos, now this is not Montezuma, this is Montezinos, this is a Jewish man, right? The Judaizing Montezinos had found himself accused by Inquisition and put in prison. The Native Americans imprisoned him. It says, praying for salvation in his cell one day, he was reciting what was then standard formula among the world Moranos. It says, blessed be the name of the Lord, who made me not an idolater, a barbarian, a Negro, an Indian. When he suddenly stopped, those Indians, he told himself, they are Hebrews. Pondering this thought, he incredulously, yet with growing conviction, he had resolved that if he were ever released, that he should seek out the Indian Francisco and try to learn the truth. So he was imprisoned by the Native Americans, and he's reciting a prayer, a rather racist prayer, a pretty racist prayer. And he said, and as soon as he gets to Indians, he stops and he says, the Indians are Hebrews. He said the Indians are Hebrews. And he said, okay, if I get out, I'm going to go to the one Native American that I know and try to see what they know. Right? It says Montezino's story, unclear, has some circumstances that were of his incarceration. It is equally unclear as to those of his release. So they don't know why he was incarcerated and they don't know why he was released. And it says, but he was. And he immediately went to Francisco, revealing himself as a Jew. Montesinos proclaimed his conviction that Francisco, a hidden people, were the same race as he. So this is a Jewish white man saying, hey, we're the same. He walks up to the Native American and says, hey, we're both Jews. And Native American lady, I'm like, duh. Right? It says here, would Francisco lead him to them? So he's saying, I need you to take me to the rest of your people. What you're going to find out is that this was mistake number one. This is mistake number one. Our people are known for hospitality. This was the first mistake that they made. It says, when two men were backed into the rugged mountains, and Francisco made the initial revelation, marching relentlessly for a week before they came to a halt. It was Saturday, and Montesinos makes a point of telling us they had come to a river larger than that of Duero, and echoes of Sembation in all of this. Here, Francisco announced, is your brothers will be seen, right? Is where your brothers will be seen. Waving a banner in the air, the Indian guide soon was greeted by a puff of smoke far beyond that of the other bank of the river. It says, in response to the signal, the two men waited. Eventually, a canoe appeared bearing a man and a woman, all of them Indians, to the place where Francisco and Montesinos were standing at the water's edge. The woman got off and spoke to Francisco in the Indian tongue, and Montesinos could not understand, although he could perceive that he was being identified in the conversation. She had turned to her male companions and explained the situation. Upon hearing her words, they rose and went over to Montesinos in utter astonishment and said, Shema Yasha Allah Ahaya Allahaya Nawa Ahaya Akkad. So they spoke the Hebrew credo to the Jew, which means, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. They had recited in Hebrew the fundamental credo of Judaism. Why do you think Christopher Columbus went to Hispaniola with a Jewish translator? Why would he need a Jewish translator going to the New World? Why would he think that he needed one? Because the same thing that we just read in 2nd Esdras concerning the scattering of the 10 tribes was the same thing that they had read here. It says here, a brief conversation ensued in their common ancestral tongue, according to Montesinos, whose fluency was almost perplexing at the reader of this narrative, in that three mysterious new companions, right? So he's saying he was astonished at the fact that not only could they speak the Hebrew language, but they spoke it clearly and fluently. And he said they told him that they were themselves the tribe of Reuben, and that the tribe of Joseph lived on an island nearby. So remember how I said that not only did they know who they were, but they also knew where the others were. When you look at the actual history of the traveling routes, what you'll find is that the Australian Aborigines in Australia lived on the outer edges of Australia. They didn't live in the center. But there were travel routes from the Philippines to Australia, from Fiji to Australia, from Samoa to Australia. So they had trade routes between the two. That's why Hawaiian plants, which weren't supposed to be in Hawaii, were there. Fish that could only be caught within miles radius of Hawaii were found in Australia. It's not possible, but it's because there was trade routes between those areas. How did the Native Americans get from North America all the way into the South Pacific Ocean with the Hawaiians? It's because they already knew where they were, right? It says here, when you drop down, it says, Francisco told Montesinos all he knew about those people's traditions, his ancestors and their eternal shame, and had indeed made war with them and persecuted them. Only sorcerers of his tribe had perceived that they were a special people. So it was the elders and the magicians of their tribe that knew who their identity were. And it says, and they had been given warning that they should be left alone. It says, the God of these children of Israel is the true God. They said that everything inscribed on the tablets is true. At the end of days, that the Lord of all the nations of the earth, one nation would come and bring all things to this land. And after we have all been provided, these children of Israel will go forth from where they are now and reign over the whole earth as they once did. So not only did they know their identity, but they also knew the prophecies that pertain to the children of Israel. So the first thing that they told the Jew when he went to see the sorcerers was, we're a special people, so you should leave us alone. That's the first thing that they said. They said, leave us alone or there'll be consequences. Right? But check out what Montesinos does. With this final flourish, Montesinos had turned his tale to the lost tribes into a bit of propaganda. for the Dutch conquest of Brazil at that time. So he used the identity, finding out the identity of the Native Americans to enslave the people in Brazil.
Wow. Wow.
Because now they had told him where the rest of the Israelites were. They said, all right, so we got tribe of Joseph over here, everybody else right there. And we'll have to go into what happened in Brazil later on. But if you want to know what black slavery came from here in the US, look at the history of the Brazilian slavery. Lynching began in Brazil. Lynching began in Brazil. The first genocides of the American country started in Brazil. The first slave trades from the Americas, the first mass slave trades happened in Brazil. They were sending 10,000 Brazilian slaves to Europe a month. Where they also started sending, and that's also the first place where black slaves were sent, to Brazil. So this Jewish man used the identity of our people against them. Said, hey guys, look who we found. So you know what? That's even more reason for us to conquest these lands. Right? Now, if you read in the first paragraph, it says even more telling things. It says after he had them explain why they thought such a thing, right? Because they had already said that they were that. Well, I'm going to read a little bit further up. It says 2.5 years before, he told them while traveling in the wild mountains of Quito, he had heard of some of his Indian guides remark that the natives of the country deserved all the suffering they had undergone at the hands of the Spaniards. So the natives that he's talking to, they said, hey, listen, all the captivities, all the death, we deserve it. He said, we deserve this suffering. And when he asked them to explain why they thought such a thing, they had replied mysteriously that it was because we so badly treated the holy people, the greatest in the world. Nothing more that had been offered by them at that point, but later in some conversation, Francisco, one of the Indian guides, had declared that his countrymen would be avenged upon the Spaniards in time anyways. Remember, it says here in Genesis chapter 49, verse 19, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Now listen to what Francisco says. It says in the Indian guide, he had declared that his countrymen would be avenged upon the Spaniards in time anyways. He knew the prophecy that was written in Genesis chapter 49, verse 19, according to the Native Americans. He said, hey, we went through all of the suffering, but they're going to get theirs anyways. And we're going to be avenged for it anyways. Right? One more source on the identity of the Native Americans. This is called The History of the American Indians by James Adair. I'll read this one.
Okay.
This is page 13. It says, for the most exact observations I could make in the long time I traveled, I traded among the Native Americans, among the Indian Americans, I was forced to believe them lineally, Salakia, descended from the Israelites, either while they were in maritime power or soon after the general captivity. Right. So so keep in mind, there was a trade that was happening prior to, because remember, prior to Plymouth Rock, they had already met the Europeans. That's why there were Native Americans there that spoke English. That wasn't the first time that they had come in contact with Europeans. So he says here, in the time that I traded with these people, I came to the conclusion that they're Israelites lineally. So he says that they are direct descendants of the Israelites coming directly out of the Assyrian captivity. Right? He says either while they were in maritime power, which is talking about the height of the Israelite state, which is under David. So he says they either left while they were under David or they left out of the Assyrian captivity. This should tell you right here that they were reading Second Esdras, same way Christopher Columbus was. It says the latter, however, is most probable. So he said it makes more sense that they left directly out of the Assyrian captivity than that they left during the time of David. Because why would they leave when their country was at their most powerful? Right? It says, this descent shall endeavor to prove their religious rites, civil and marital customs, their marriages, their funeral ceremonies, manners, language, and traditions, and a variety of particulars, which will at the same time make the reader thoroughly acquainted with the nations, of which may be said, to this day, very little have been known. So this particular book that he wrote was based around specifically proving that the Gadites were the tribes of Israel. And in later time, there's a man named Steve Evans, I believe. I believe his name is, let me pull it up. His name is Ethan Smith. Ethan Smith. He was a man who at that time, during the massacres of the Native American people, was saying that it was immoral and unlawful, and that the Native Americans' God would destroy the Europeans because these were the children of Israel. And he dedicated his whole life's work from that point to proving that the Native Americans were from the tribe of Israel, from the house of Israel. Right? So a couple of facts that are normally, now that we proved that the Native Americans, beyond a shadow of a doubt, are from the lost tribes of Israel. Mm-hmm. Some facts that are ignored is that the Europeans, number one, traveling to the Americas, they have been traveling to the Americas for over a century prior to Plymouth Rock. Over a century. Not to mention that the disciples and prophets also knew where those people were. So they had also come in contact with blacks in that time, which is why prior to slavery, they were black skeletons among the Native American burial grounds. Right? It also says here that they already knew that that people were present on that land and that they would have to take the land from the Gadites in order to acquire it. Right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing that they thought is, it's sort of like when you buy a house. It's like, well, okay, I'm going to get in this house. Now I got to clean it up. Got to get rid of all the bugs. Got to make sure ain't nothing in here. Same thing. They say, all right, y'all, this is our new home. Get those roaches off the land. Uh-huh. Right? Second, religious separatists made up less than half of the group traveling to America. They weren't coming for religious freedom. Mm-hmm. Less than half of them were coming. It's like, hey, you know what? I want to be a Christian. So you know what? Let's go to the U.S. That's your resolve? There was a ton of places in Europe where they could have had religious freedom. Mm-hmm. Why America? They did it for economic wealth. These were business people that were coming to the U.S. And if they were really coming for religious freedom, why have a cavalry coming right behind you? You had an army coming right behind them. Right? Mm-hmm. And lastly, the Native Americans, the treaties were made with the Native Americans to teach the Europeans how to survive on their land and they would soon proceed to destroy them. Right? Over 350 treaties were made with the Native Americans that were broken. 350 treaties. Wow. 350. Check this out. There's a prophecy of this. Let's get Psalms chapter 55, verse 20.
Psalms chapter 55, verse 20. He hath put forth his hands against such to be at peace with him.
He hath put forth his hands against such that be at peace with him. Native Americans didn't have a problem with them. Mm-hmm. He said, listen, we ain't do nothing to you. You ain't do nothing to us. Mm-hmm. We cool. They taught them how to grow everything. They say, hey, we've seen Europeans before. We never had a problem with y'all before. Right. So you know what? Come on in. We'll teach y'all how to cook and everything. Make sure you got it right. They were at peace. Mm-hmm. Read.
He hath broken his covenant.
He hath broken his covenant. It's because he went into it with the already knowing what he was going to do. Mm-hmm. He said, I need this land. But if I start killing them now, we'll just be another Jamestown. Uh-huh. We can't survive here. So make a treaty, and then we'll take care of business once it's over. Mm-hmm. It says he put forth his hands against such that be at peace with him. Right? Mm-hmm. Let's get verse 21.
Verse 21. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter.
We're friends. We would never hurt you. Look at all the beautiful women you have. Right? No, I mean, it's like, hey, we're friends. We're great guys. Mm. We only brought 3 guns instead of 30. Read.
But war was in his heart.
but war was in his heart. He came knowing with exactly what he was going to do. He said, you know what? Let's just tell him. It's like Survivor. They'll be like, hey, we're good. You can trust me. I'm not writing your name down tonight. And then you sitting there at tribal council all confident. You're like, yeah, I ain't going home today. Jerry, huh? Jerry, what? Jerry, huh? You're going home. It's like, oh, and then the person who told you that you were safe, looking at you like,
broke the cover.
Blindsided you. The same thing here. Read.
His words were softer than oil, but were they drawn swords?
They were saying all of this nice stuff. You know what? They had a gun to their head while saying, we're friends. Had a gun pointed at them saying, hey, we're friends. Right? See, why is this important? Why is this important? Because the same thing that happened to the Native Americans then is still happening to our people now. They say it says peace. When they say peace, know that sudden destruction is coming upon you. They say, hey, Joe Biden's president. Everything's okay now. We don't got to worry about people not wanting us in the country and racism because Joe Biden is president now. Joe Biden says, don't worry. You're safe. No, sudden destruction is coming upon you. Same thing. Vaccinations are the blankets with smallpox. They're saying, hey, you look cold. Have these blankets. Now 90%, now that disease has killed 90% of you. Now they can just come in and wipe you out. See the problem, what the Europeans knew is that they couldn't contend, they couldn't fight hand in hand with our people. They said you can't just go up on our people one-on-one and expect to win. They needed to weaken us first. So if you get us sick, you kill off the elderly, you kill off the strong of our men, or you make them weak. Now I can fight you. That's why guns were invented. They tried to go up into the Hawaiian Islands with some swords and got jacked up. So they say, you know what, we need something more powerful. 10 of us is one of them. See, and by the time they had come to Africa to get us, we had already been weakened by the Arabs. By the Arabs at that time. They had already come through and conquested us. Majority of us in northern West Africa were already Moors. We had already been getting carried off into Europe. People don't know about that slave trade. How do you think Shakespeare in the time in the 1600s was able to write about an African Moor in Europe? And that particular African Moor's parents were slaves, because there was slave trades happening from West Africa to Europe this whole time by way of the Arabs, which is why they were Muslim. Still a large fraction of our people in West Africa are Muslim. So not only were our people inundated with a wicked religion, which weakened us, but you also had people like the Germans who destroyed our people in the Congo. A lot of people don't know about that. That was a straight up genocide for rubber. We had trees that were harvesting rubber, chopping off people's hands and stuff like that. Genocide at the Congo. Right? The same things that are happening then are happening now, but now they're using a back door. They've always had to use a back door. Because our people are aware at this point. We know who our enemy is. Some of us.
True.
A lot of us are distracted by the Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But for those of us who are smart, those of us who have our eyes open, we know who the real enemy is. They can't come to us with a vaccine and say, you don't want to die, do you? Right? I mean, the fact of the matter is that vaccines have been around for over a century, but our people are still sick. I mean, if vaccines were really all that they're hyped up to be, we would already be healthy, right? And please tell me why it is that you're taking your vaccines to Africa. Oh, they're children in need. But what about the white children in need in Europe? Why don't you have an some type of initiative to get them? What about all the sick children in India? Where are you trying to get vaccines to them? Or China? I don't see any initiative by Bill Gates to get the children in China. No, you want to help those poor black kids in Africa. Eugenics. It's racist. It always has been racist. People are talking about, racial targeting in tobacco. What about racial targeting in abortion? More than 79% of abortion clinics are located in black neighborhoods. And what about forced sterilization laws? And majority of our states here in the US, where our women in prison and those of our women who they claim aren't smart enough are forcefully sterilized and can't have children. Oh, but we want to talk about women's choice. But white women get a choice, but our women don't get a choice. I don't want to have a baby. I can get an abortion. That's a white lady. A black woman, like, I want to have kids. No, you're going to get sterilized. See, Thanksgiving was really the start of the genocide of the Israelite people in the Americas. It's a symbol. In the Native American culture, it's a day of mourning. But for our people, it should be a symbol of how we can't trust these people. Yet we continue to trust these people as if we can. We can't trust our own people, but we're so quick to trust in a man that we've never seen before. A man that's only shown us his wicked side. Oh, black people so quick to jump on with Joe Biden. Forgetting about the hundreds of thousands of black men that he put in prison. Or our black children who he called cockroaches. Or the 8 years he had in office with Barack Obama, where the only thing he did for black people was protect the cops against us.
Come on.
Thanksgiving should be a day where our people look at it and say, we cannot trust these people. Over 350 treaties broken. Not even getting into the ethnic cleansing and the rape and all that happened to our brothers and sisters in that time period. See, but even then, contrary to popular belief, Thanksgiving actually has very little to do with the history between the Native Americans or the Gadites and the Europeans. See, this was a tradition. Thanksgiving was a tradition that was being held prior to the arrival of the Europeans in the US. How many of y'all knew that? Thanksgiving was a holiday prior to the Americas. It's actually a holiday that's still being kept in Europe to this day. Why would Canada have a Thanksgiving? Canada had nothing to do with Thanksgiving, right? Mm-hmm. Why would they have a Thanksgiving? Why do the Roman Catholics have a Thanksgiving? Well, we're going to look at it. See, we still must acknowledge, even though it has little to do with the history between Native Americans and the Europeans, we still must acknowledge that the friendships and the broken treaties between these people and the colonists did happen. But Thanksgiving is a day that existed long before 1620. We're going to go to a document, a book that was written by Bradley Richardson called Thanksgiving Day, Pagan, right? And in this, he has a lot of sources concerning the history of Thanksgiving and the timeline in which Thanksgiving began and evolve, right? Because a harvest festival isn't something new. The Israelites had a harvest festival. It's called Sukkot or the Feast of Tabernacles, which is held in September, in the fall, in the beginning of the fall. So having a harvest feast wasn't anything new. But the way that they kept it was nothing short of unique. Let's go ahead and read this.
All right. Thanksgiving Day, pagan, Bradley Richardson. Most history books would like to convince us that Thanksgiving Day goes back only to Plymouth Rock in the 1600s. Plymouth Rock was not the first Thanksgiving Day, though. Also, have you ever wondered why Canada has a Thanksgiving Day, but on a different date? This pagan feast honoring the agricultural gods goes back thousands of years in one form or another. Thanksgiving Day in the United States and Canada, a day set apart for giving thanks to God for blessings of the year.
Now, those blessings of the year were actually quite specific. The blessings of the year in that time was the destruction of the Native Americans, which is why the song "We Gather Together," which was written by one of the pilgrims at that time, states them giving thanks to God for giving them victory over the Native Americans, for the destruction of the Native Americans. Read.
Originally, it was a harvest Thanksgiving. And while the purpose has become less specific, the festival still takes place in late autumn after the crops have been gathered. Indeed, it is probably an outgrowth of the harvest home celebrations in England. Such celebrations are of very ancient origin, beginning nearly universal among primitive peoples.
So even the Native Americans had a form of Thanksgiving. They had during the different times of harvest, they celebrated. So when the crops grew in or different things like that, they had feasts. That's nothing new, right? But the European versions of Thanksgiving has more religious overtones, which is why they're kept in churches, why they were kept in churches, and why rituals were done, right? And at this time, why sacrifices were done. Because a lot of people think that the massacres stopped at 1620. Yearly, it was a custom for them to hunt Native Americans, kill them. They would chop their heads off and kick their heads around for sport. They would go scalp collecting. People would make it seem like scalping was something that started with the Native Americans. That didn't start with the Native Americans. It started with the Europeans, where they would capture people and cut their scalp off. They would cut the top of the hair on the top of their head off, and they would use it to say, "Hey, this is what I got," and they would sell it and they would make money off of it. Right? That was started with the Europeans. Now the Native Americans started doing it back, but it started with the Europeans. That was something that actually was still being done to the Australian Aborigines until 1986. Until 1986 in Australia, Australian Aborigines were still being hunted for sport. Right? Read.
The first Thanksgiving in the New World, however.
Now, see how specific that is. It says the first Thanksgiving in the New World. Not the first Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving in the New World. Read.
Was not merely a feast. There were prayers, sermons, songs of praise, and 3 days had gone by before the Indians returned to their forests and the colonists to their tasks.
Okay, so at the first Thanksgiving, it was a peaceful. That was a peaceful. What would you call it? A peaceful feast, right? It was a 3-day thing where they used that particular time not only to create treaties and to pray and to do sermons and different things like that, but they also were using that time to convert the Native Americans to Christianity. Right? Read.
In 1789, the Protestant Episcopal Church in America announced the first Thursday in November as a regular annual day for giving thanks. It was not until 1888, however, that the Roman Catholic Church formally recognized the day.
Now, what does the Roman Catholic Church have to do with this? What do they have to do with this? They have nothing. The Roman Catholic Church has nothing to do with America. They apparently at that time they had no investments in America, even though we all know that they did. They weren't connected to America in really any way. So what does it matter if they declare it a holiday, a formally recognized day? And what authority do they have to say, well, across the whole earth, Thanksgiving is a holiday? Only a nation that's in power over the whole earth can do that, right? Keep in mind, every nation that was the most powerful nation on earth, what did they do? They implemented their religion as the religion of the earth. When you take a country into captivity, you give them your religion. So what gives the Roman Catholic Church the idea that they can say, well, this is an international holiday? It's because the Roman Catholic Church was still in power at that time. The Roman Catholic Church never fell. The Christian religion belongs to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, actually, when you look at the Americas, is predominantly the main religion of the Americas. They hold the lead pretty much 10-2. Right? So the Roman Catholic Church says, well, you know what? We're going to celebrate this day. It's a national holiday. Right, Reed?
Throughout the country, but especially in New England, where the custom originated, the day is looked upon with great reverence.
Reed?
Thanksgiving Day in Canada, the Dominion too, was an annual Thanksgiving Day, which is celebrated in much same way, with family reunions and religious services.
Family reunions and religious services. And religious services. So the conception of this particular religion was surrounded with religious connotation. So a lot of people don't have the belief that Thanksgiving isn't a religious holiday. But in New England it is. To the Roman Catholic Church it is. If it wasn't a religious holiday, why would the Roman Catholic Church need to verify it? Put its stamp of approval on it. Keeping in mind that the people who were in the Americas celebrating Thanksgiving weren't Catholic. So why is it that the Catholic Church needs to put their stamp of approval on something that isn't Catholic? Read.
Although we have nationalized Thanksgiving, celebrations were held in ancient times to give thanks for the bountiful harvest. The Greeks honored Demeter.
Read.
The goddess of agriculture, with a 9-day celebration. The Romans honored Ceres. Anglo-Saxons rejoiced with the feast to celebrate reaping of the harvest. And the Jews have given thanks for a bountiful harvest with their 8-day Feast of Tabernacles.
All right, so the Israelites had Feast of Tabernacles, but all these other nations also had their harvest feast, right? Read.
Even before biblical times, the ancient people of the Mediterranean basin held festivals at harvest time in honor of the Earth Mother, the goddess of the corn. Corn being the European term for grain. Indian corn, which is American corn, is called maize. Was always one of the most important deities in the hierarchy of the gods, and her child was the young god of vegetation.
So even the food traditions that we have, or the food traditions that white people still have today. We always make this clear that there's a difference between Southern cooking and soul food. See, black people put a twist on what it is that they do for Thanksgiving. But if you look at Southern cooking, or the white people's definition, or Caucasian people's definition of what Thanksgiving food is, it's been the same since this time. Hasn't changed. You still got stuffing, you still got corn, it's very basic. It's basic, but the same traditions as to what was eating and its symbolic connotations are still the same. So knowingly or unknowingly, they're still honoring the same gods that they believe helped them destroy the Native Americans. And when we go into our lesson on Christmas, we'll let you know who that God is. Read.
The ancient Semites called the Earth Mother Astarte. The Phrygians called her Semele. The Moans, Salakia. The Moans had an Earth Mother for each district. All these local deities were absorbed by the Greeks into one great goddess, Demeter.
So the Greeks took all of these gods that they knew, all of these earth gods from that time, and they encompassed it into one God. One God to be reverenced on this particular day. Right? Read.
Besides eating, feasting, etc., the married women practiced special rites.
Now check out what these women were doing on these days. Read.
Under the cover of night, the women spent the next day bathing nude in the sea and dancing and playing on the seashore. Then they fasted, sang songs, and feasted, sang and held general gaiety. All this lasted over a period of several days. Continue.
Now, if you don't know what witches do, if you look up the book The Witch's Guide, right? You'll see that these were the same things that the witches did, that the witches do. This is the exact same thing that witches do at certain times of year, mainly in this time of year, from the time of Halloween to the end of December and New Year's. That's an ancient religious ceremony held by witches. You can look that up. That's common knowledge. So these particular women at this time of year would keep the traditions of witches. That's not what it's saying here, but that's exactly what the witches did, almost word for word. So the next part says the Roman harvest festival was called Cerealia, after Ceres, the Roman goddess of the corn. That's why the Romans put their stamp of approval on the Roman Catholic Church. I mean on Thanksgiving, because it was connected back to Rome anyways. So the question of why Rome is involved, why Rome felt the need to put the stamp of approval on Thanksgiving is right here. It says the Roman harvest festival was called Cerealia, or after Ceres, the Roman goddess of the corn. So the traditions that were under Thanksgiving went directly back to Rome. With the acceptance of Christianity, the official religion of Rome, and the conversation of the barbarians who had invaded the crumbling empire, these pagan rituals were frowned upon and even forbidden by law. However, the peasants clung to them with a tenacity, which was made word pagan, originally simply meaning a villager, a synonym for heathen. As late as the 6th century, Saint Benedict found a local peasantry worshiping Apollo at a sacred grove. Even after conversation, old habits and beliefs died hard, and the Christian church was too busy to trouble with minor heresies. So, because these particular practices that were held by the Roman Catholic Church, they were banned originally in the U.S. because they linked back to Rome and they believed that it was wicked. But due to the peasants in the lower class continuing to serve these gods on these days, they found their way back into the U.S. It says Saint Benedict found a local peasantry worshiping Apollo at a sacred grove. even after this conversion, right? Even after this conversion, these people were converted. These Christians were converted from the Roman religion. They still continued to serve their old gods in the same ways. Remember how we always talk about the mixture of paganism and Roman Catholicism to create Christianity? There you go. There you go. You got a Christian worshiping Apollo. Right? But it says that the church was too busy to trouble with minor heresies. They say we're just gonna let it go. The benevolent Earth Mother blended with equally benevolent Mother of Christ. I'm going to say that again. The benevolent Earth Mother blended with the equally benevolent Mother of Christ. Folk memory of local deities fused the Christian tales of saints to provide patrons for villages. The white-robed goddess of grain lived in various guises. Guises is another word for disguise. So what do we see here, right? They took their god, Demeter, right? And they said, you know what? Demeter is a lot like Mary. So why don't we make the two the same? So the Christians of that time began to mix the traditions and the names together, right? And now you have a more modern and peasant-friendly version of Thanksgiving. So the white-robed goddess of the grain lived on in various guises. You want to finish up?
I'm trying to see where you left off at.
Okay, right there. You're right there.
Two. Okay. To those who live close to the soil, the harvest was an emotional and religious significance. Their gratitude finds expression in the rights and honor of the being who they feel is most closely related to fruitfulness and being of warm earth rather than cold heaven.
So even still, this particular, even after this point, it took on even more religious connotation, right? It became even more religious, not just religious, but emotional as well. It was of emotional and religious significance. Why do you think it is that when you tell people, hey, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving no more, they catch attitude and start crying? It's like, what about your family? This is a day for family. Not understanding everything that encompasses or surrounds this particular holiday. See, notice nobody gets mad when you say you don't celebrate Halloween. Nobody gets offended when you say, nah, I'm not doing Easter. But the second you mess with Thanksgiving and Christmas, oh man, it's about to be a battle. Those are the two you cannot touch. Nobody be like, oh no, I don't do Valentine's Day. Oh, all right, love you anyway. You're like, Easter, oh, it's all good. We'll pray for you. Halloween, oh, I know a lot of people that don't do Halloween. And then Thanksgiving come around. Now you got a problem. Now you got a battle on your hands. That's because it's not just a day for family. Not only is there, especially for our people, it's wrapped up in religion as well. Because a lot of us, if it's on Sunday, we go to church and then we'll go right to, right? It's as much religious as it is for family for a lot of our people, right? And then on top of that, it's an emotional holiday. Your emotions are wrapped up in it. These are the holidays that are the hardest to let go of. All of those memories. You leave Christmas one year, right? And then the next year come around and you start the cool weather come in. You get that little cool breeze, touch your arm a little bit. And then you start seeing people putting up their lights and people posting their Christmas trees and candy canes and all kinds of stuff in the stores. That Christmas spirit start coming back. You be like, Lord, I remember Christmas. That old feeling that you get when everybody start playing, people start putting on the Grinch and the Christmas story. You start getting, it's because it's not just a holiday. Your spirit, your emotions is wrapped up into this holiday, which is why it's so hard for people to let go of it when you come out of it. And it's so hard for you to stay away from it when you get out of it. Because there's a spirit behind these holidays. Don't nobody care about Halloween. Like, okay, Halloween is fun. Even though that's straight up demonic and wicked. People see it, oh, it's just a fun day. Easter, nobody's really wrapped up in Easter. But when it comes to the spirits that are operating between now and New Year's, that's when wickedness is at its height. And the spirits that are wrapped up in this particular emotional and religious experience is also a reason why suicides are their highest at this time of year. When on TV, they're putting the stereotypical example of what your Christmas should look like. For people who don't have that. For people who lost their families and they've lost a lot. People who are homeless. It's not just, this isn't just a holiday. It's emotions wrapped up in this. Right? We see here that Thanksgiving is as much a religious practice among the European heathens as it is just a family day. Right? This is why the Most High tells us not to go in the way of the heathen and not even to inquire about their customs. Let's get Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 29.
Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 29. When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, whether thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedeth them, and dwelleth in their land.
So he says, once you go into the land of Israel, and I remove all of the people that's on that land. This is your land now. They're in subjection to you. Read.
Verse 30. Take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them.
He says, don't do what they do. Anything that you see them do the opposite. Read.
After that, they be destroyed from before thee.
See, because they knew something that we, for some reason, can never comprehend. If we succumb to their gods and their traditions, we are in subjection to them. Why do you think that they wouldn't just leave after they were conquered? Because there was always a chance that some Negro would go to them and say, hey, how do you worship Allah? And they say, well, let me show you. And now you got a brother here worshiping Allah now, and he's going to all his brothers saying, hey, I got this kufi. You want one? And now you walk around with a little cap on the top of your head, and this thing is spreading like a wildfire. And what happens? Now, the people that you have power over now have religious power over you. See, the main reason our people were able to be kept in slavery for so long is because our religion had us to do so. They gave us white Christianity, did they not? And they told us, serve your masters. It's not good for a slave boy to run away. Look at white Jesus. He looks just like me. Right? So now that we have that conviction, now that we have some level of superstition, we've placed ourselves in mental bondage under these people, not realizing that the whole time we had the numbers. We had the majority. It was Christianity that kept that, like, let's keep these people at bay. That's what Nat Turner was for. Nat Turner was a pastor. He was going around teaching all the slaves, be a good slave. Don't rebel, because the Bible says that that's not good. It was the religion that kept us in captivity so long. So this is why the Most High is saying, take heed that you're not snared by following them. Because the second you go and follow their God, you've now relinquished your dominion to them. And that's the same thing that our people are doing today. Oh, I'm taking my power back. I'm taking my power back. Muhammad, how stupid you look. How mad would Malcolm X be. I said this yesterday. How mad would Malcolm X be when all Malcolm X preached was the power that we have within our own communities, building our own communities, generational wealth, and empowering our own people, not realizing that the money that they were spending on these prayer mats and on these kufis and on all of this and on the Quran was going directly back to the Arabs. The same thing that he despised. Oh, we need to start buying from the white man and feeding the white man, when the whole time you were feeding the Arabs. He was a hypocrite and didn't even know it. This is why the Most High said, listen, don't follow them. You follow them, you're in subjection to them. You see that? Everybody following? Read.
And that thou inquire not after their gods,
Read.
saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise.
He says, don't even ask questions about their religion. You don't need to know. What you got to know about Allah for? You're the most powerful nation on the earth following me. What you need to know about Allah for? What's the point in that? Well, how do you pray to Allah? I need to know. That's what Esau does. Except Esau does it for a different purpose. See, Esau wasn't given anything. So the only thing that he gets through war and bloodshed. Hence the Native Americans. He has no land, so I need to go and take land from you. Right? So they go in saying, well, how do you serve Buddha? How do you know what? I'm going to be a Buddhist too. That's what Esau does. And they do it, and they did the same thing to Israel in 70 AD. They converted to Judaism after they destroyed us, and they said, you know what? We're the Jews. Look, we're practicing Judaism. Right? So it says, don't even inquire after their gods. Don't ask, well, what God do you serve? Don't ask how you serve that God. No, you don't need to ask any questions. It's like, listen, they serve Allah, let them serve Allah. You don't need to know nothing about that. They serve Yahweh, you let them serve Yahweh. That's got nothing to do with you. But no. We're a curious people, aren't we? Mm-hmm. They have a king. I want one too. Study the most powerful nation on the planet, talking about you want a king. Read.
Verse 31. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods.
So he's saying everything that I hate, they do to their gods. He's saying, I told you I don't want no child sacrifice. Don't let your children pass through the fire to Moloch. They sacrifice their children. The Most High says, don't be polytheistic. You serve one God. They're polytheistic. Literally everything that the heathen do, they do opposite of what the Most High commands. So he says, listen, everything that I hate, they do to their gods. Stay away from it. Read.
For even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods.
They sacrificed their children. Now, we look at this now like, I would never sacrifice my child. That don't sound like something black folk would do, but we was doing it. We're definitely doing it. The Most High says that anything that the heathen do, to stay away from it. That includes holidays. What we need to be curious about Christmas for? Oh, how you keep Christmas? I need to know. Well, how do you do Thanksgiving? Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? Curious about everything. What's Rosh Hashanah? Like, nobody need to know about all that. So anything that comes from the heathen, anything that comes from them, whether it be a holiday, any kind of custom, any kind of habits that they have, we are to stay away from it. Because everything that they do is wicked. It's innately within them to be wicked. Their customs are evil and vain. They must be avoided altogether. So Thanksgiving came from the Europeans. Get rid of it. Let's get 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 20.
1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 20. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God.
So you may be thinking that on Thanksgiving, I'm making my food for Jesus. This food is for Jesus. You know, this food ain't for Moloch. This for Jesus right here. But it's saying that the same food that the heathen got down the street, they are sacrificing the devils. The same customs that you're participating in. Why do you think that the Most High said in the book of Amos that he hates the smell of our food? He hates our holy days, our customs. It's not that he hates his own law, but the fact that we were keeping his law to other gods. We would say instead of giving the Most High, knowing the Most High's name is Ahia, we're attributing his works to Yahweh. We're keeping the Feast of Tabernacles to Yahweh. We're keeping the Feast of Tabernacles, and our people are still doing that to this day. Yahweh, Yahoo. All of these names somebody pulled out of their behind. All names for Satan. Saying, "Oh, praise Yahweh for creating the waters and the earth." You've just attributed the Most High's works to Satan. That's why he says that he refuses to smell the food in our assemblies. He doesn't accept our sacrifices. He hates our holy days. You can't attribute something that belongs to the devil, to the heathen, to the Most High. You can't do it. The Most High doesn't associate himself with evil. 1 Thessalonians says, avoid all appearance of evil. If it looks evil, and if you see a heathen somewhere doing it, it looks evil. Because start over from verse 20. Why? Why does it sound evil? Why does it look evil if you see a heathen, if you see a Gentile doing it? Read.
But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God.
That's why the appearance is evil. Because you're seeing that this particular holy day was established by the Gentile. So I don't need to look at somebody Thanksgiving and say, well, it looks pretty safe to me. Read.
And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils.
And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. Read.
Verse 21. Ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils.
You can't say, well, I keep the Feast of Dedication. I keep the Feast of Lights. I keep Passover. And I keep the Feast of Weeks. And I keep the Feast of Tabernacles and the memorial blowing of trumpets. But I want to keep Thanksgiving and Christmas too.
Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils.
You can't eat from the Most High's feast and then turn around and go to Thanksgiving and eat of his feast too. Come on. It's one or the other. It's one or the other. You can't drink of the cup of the Most High and of the cup of devils. You don't get to dip your feet in both pots. Let's get 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 26. Now we're talking about what should you keep Thanksgiving? I think we established that you shouldn't keep Thanksgiving. Read.
1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 26. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient.
All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Read.
All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not.
Mm-hmm.
Let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Whatsoever is sold whatsoever is sold in the shambles that eat, asking no question for conscience sake.
Now, I want to speak to this specifically in verse 25. It says, whatsoever is sold in the shambles. The shambles in Israelite communities was where the Gentiles sold food. Right? So now back then in this particular time, it was looked at like, listen, the Gentiles are unclean. So if they cooking food, that food is unclean too. Now, this is speaking of righteous food. This isn't saying that they were out here eating pork and everything, right? This is food, right? Because remember, we did the lesson, what is food, right? There's anything that's not considered clean is not food, right? Anything that's not numbered amongst the dietary laws as clean in Leviticus chapter 11 is not food, nor are they acknowledged as food. You don't sit up here and eat paper. It's not food. That's the way that they looked at pigs back then. A pig is not food. They're like, listen, that's a trash can. We don't eat those. So it says, whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that eat, right? So this is saying you are hungry and you're going through the city and you're starving and you're going through the shambles and somebody's selling some clean meat, buy it, eat. Don't ask any questions, right? He said, like, for conscience sake, don't go up there saying, all right, so what you sacrificed to the devil lately? You sacrificed this food to devils lately? Mm-hmm. He said, listen, if you are starving and there's no other place you can eat, you in the shambles, hey, buy some food, don't ask no questions. Don't worry about it. Eat. Don't sit up here and die trying to be over righteous. Christ has never required that of us. Like trying, to die under your own will. Like you could have ate, but instead you like, okay. You could have ate, but instead you like, no, I'm not going. I'm just going to sit up here and die, even though it's some clean food sitting right there, even though it's made by a Gentile. Read
verse 26. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Mm-hmm. If any of them that believe not bid ye to a feast.
So if anybody who doesn't believe the truth, who isn't a part of the body of Christ, bids you to feast, read.
And ye be disposed to go. Mm-hmm. Whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake.
Now, speaking to this in specific, it says, if any of them that believe not bid you to feast and you be disposed to go, whatsoever is set before you eat. That doesn't say that unclean. That's not talking about unclean meat. That's talking about clean food. Eat, asking no questions for conscience sake. This is speaking of whether the food, actually read verse 28.
Verse 28. But if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not. For his sake it showed it. That showed it. And for conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So
it's speaking of whether this food was sacrificed to devils or not, right? If you go to somebody else and they say, hey, this food was made in honor of Allah, don't eat, right? Now, speaking specifically to this, if your family invites you to come eat, right, to come to a feast, and you have nothing to do and you want to go, then go. But you need to be mindful. Having the understanding of what Thanksgiving is. We understand that Thanksgiving is a religious ceremony, right? But it's also a time of year where people get together that you may not be able to see. Mm-hmm. For those who are new in the truth, for those who are new in the truth and don't really and really are in a situation where this is where the over righteous thing comes in. I'm gonna break it down like this. You got brothers that come into the truth, brothers or sisters that come into the truth, and none of their family knows, and they say, hey, come to Thanksgiving. And they go to cussing that person out. Hey, Thanksgiving is the devil, murdered people, such and such, da 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 da. Who are you to scold someone who doesn't know the information that you know? They extended that invitation to you out of love.
That's right.
They want to see you. For them, this is my family, and I want to see them. This is a family day. Mm-hmm. So who are you to burn a bridge with your family member because of what you know? The scriptures say, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Right? All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Right? Mm-hmm. So having the understanding, if your family invites you, hey, come over. Use that for edification. Because they don't know what you know. give them the opportunity to tell them what you know. So if they say, hey, come on over, you're like, well, all right, but I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you about what Thanksgiving is. Now, after you've done that, after you've already reached out to them and tried to extend the truth once, twice, 3 times, don't deal with it no more. There's no reason for you to be there. Right? There's no need for you to go amongst those people again. If you've already tried to extend the truth to your family and they still decide to keep Thanksgiving, there's no need for you to go amongst those people again. Right? It says here, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Not everybody knows what you know, but you have the opportunity to edify them. Have the understanding that Christ went into the synagogue with the intention of pulling them out of the synagogue. I'm going to say that again. Christ went into the synagogue with the intention of pulling them out of the synagogue. Christ didn't go into the synagogue saying, hey, this is where the party at. We're going to be here. Christ went in there speaking words and bringing teachings that will pull the people out of the synagogue. Right? So have the understanding that, first of all, this is not saying that you're supposed to go and eat unclean meat. This is saying that if you have an opportunity to edify people and pull them out of Thanksgiving, use that opportunity. But after you've already extended that opportunity, there's no need for you to show up. Now, this is something that we often did when we weren't even in the truth yet. There, you also have to have the understanding of who your family is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because some of y'all go to these gatherings, know good and doggone well what's going to be there. Alcohol, weed, all kinds of mess. Don't put yourself in that position.
Yep, exactly.
It's about, the scriptures say, be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. Be wise about the situation that you may or may not be going into. We used to do this all the time before we came into the truth. We would, when the family was having an occasion, they'd be like, hey, come through. We would literally come through. We'll pass right through there. Hey, go in, see everybody. Hey, how you doing? All right, roll out. 10, 15 minutes tops. If it's really about family, then that's okay. If your grandma, your auntie, and such come down, you ain't seen them in a year, and they say, hey, they want to see you on Thanksgiving, that's exactly what you do. You pass through. You see your family members, hey, you leave out. If it's really about family, then that's okay. See, what we have to understand is that even though our beliefs and what we do separate us from our families in a sense, it doesn't need to be what divides us from our family altogether. People burn their own bridges with their family. Your family invites you to Thanksgiving, you go to cussing them out, now they don't want to talk to you no more. Well, I got kicked out to Thanksgiving. I done got kicked out the house because I done went back to my parents' house and cussed them out about Thanksgiving, and now I ain't got a place to go. You don't disrespect the person's house, the person who invited you, because they didn't invite you in that spirit. They invited you out of love.
That's right.
So whether you go or you don't go, the invitation should be accepted or declined with love. When you go to these feasts, you don't eat. Don't go in there and eat because we know what the holiday is. We know what it is. Thank Christmas, you shouldn't be there at all. Don't go. Somebody say, hey, you want to come over? Nah. Right? Because when you look at this, we have to have the understanding that there has to be an opportunity for us to educate and pull our people out of these traditions. Right? Like I said, Christ went into the synagogue with the intention of pulling people out of the synagogue. Once you see that the opportunity to pull people out of the synagogue isn't there, there's no more need for you to go back into the synagogue. So what if you go to see your family on Thanksgiving and you extend that olive branch and they decline, there's no need for you to go back. Right?
Right.
I mean, fact of the matter is that you only have one family.
That's right.
And the fact of the matter is, whether you're new in this truth or you're old in the truth, your family will come around. When we first came into this truth, one side of the family completely just sort of, but eventually they come back around. They're like, all right, since we know y'all don't do Saturdays, we're gonna figure out a way so that y'all don't have to do this. We can do it on a different day so that y'all can be there.
That's the only way it was going to happen.
That's the only way it's gonna happen. And eventually, once they see that you aren't budging, that you aren't gonna move, they'll be like, they'll call next thing. They'll call you up. They'll be like, hey, I know you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, so but you know your grandma down here, your auntie down here, you know you ain't seen them in forever, so just come on, pass through to see them. Mm-hmm. And if you want a plate, I got a plate made for you. They already know that you don't eat pork. They're like, hey, it's all clean meat on there. Yep, ain't nothing wicked on there. Just pass through, see your family. Mm-hmm. Right?
That's right.
I got a question.
What's up?
Why do I keep hearing food makes the whole situation? I mean, because pork or whatever anybody eats, I mean, is that going to take their life away? Are they going to go to hell because of it? I mean, the truth of what everybody knows about what Leviticus says about what is eaten. Christ is the reason for everything to be lifted. I'm listening to this.
Let's hold on. Let's finish this. That's a totally separate lesson.
It's a good one. Once we finish up, I'm gonna answer that for you.
Let's close this lesson out, and then we'll go into questions and stuff. Let's do that first.
Okay. So back on track. Once again, this says that all things are lawful but not expedient. Right? So if there's an opportunity for you to extend that olive branch, extend it. But after that point, there's no reason for you to continue to extend the olive branch. That's it. Right? And it needs and entering into this season, into this holiday season, it's of common understanding that a lot of people, especially when you first come into this truth, you feel alone. Mm-hmm. You feel alone because you're not celebrating the same holidays that the rest of your family is celebrating and different things like that. But at the end of the day, you have to understand your family comes around. It's not, and even then Christ said it. He who forsakes father and mother for me is he who forsakes me for father and mother is not worthy of me. Right? Eventually, what things walk away or go away in this walk come back. They always do. But we have to have the understanding that we have to stick to Christ and Christ's words. Mm-hmm. Right? All right. So that is the conclusion of the lesson on Thanksgiving. Do you have anything as far as context or anything like that?
No, sir. Did a great job.
All right. All praises to the Most High. Now, concerning that question, we're going to get it in Scripture. We're going to get that in Scripture. Now, a lot of people think that the dietary law. Okay, the question, you can go ahead and ask the question again and I'll repeat it.
No, I applaud, how this is going. I'm proud of my nephew growing up and how and I have no issue with none of that. But to me, it's not a big deal what somebody else does or how they do it. But if you're going to separate yourself because of what someone else does or think or whatever, if family members, friends, good people to you to them, and then you just drop it all because it seems to be a self-righteous thing or a judgmental type thing to me. That's how I view it because the Bible, I'm very well aware of it all. Mm-hmm. But the number one thing about the Bible is Christ Jesus, who came to give his life to bring us back from something that we couldn't bring ourselves back from. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when I'm listening to what you're saying about eating, and I'm gonna say this one thing and I'm gonna let it go. I had these things on my arm. prayer. It's called push prayer. Push me to pray until something happens. Okay. I listened to an elder, a lady, talking about her friend, her good friend. They went to a restaurant. But since the elder was going to pay for the food, she had the audacity to say, in a joking way, according to her, well, you can't eat this and that, but go ahead and eat what you want. It's no big deal. So her friend ordered what she wanted. The elder pulled out a Bible with the food on the table and began to admonish her about what that was going on. Long story short, they're not friends anymore. I mean, they were longtime friends, and they destroyed their friendship because of what somebody thought or believed instead of just letting it go. Because to me, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal to separate yourself from your family because, like you said, because they drink or whatever. Let them drink or whatever. I mean, you're not participating in that part, but you with the family. It's a big deal, so it kind of bothers me. It sounds like that, hey, how you doing? I'm gone. Cause you eating pork or unclean food or whatever the case may be. And that sounds self-righteous and judgmental.
Now,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Couple things. First thing, no one said we wouldn't come by or don't come by and see your family because y'all got pork. What we said was, hold on. We said no, don't. You said not coming by because they're eating pork. No. We said that we won't eat. That had nothing to do with not coming by. You know what I'm saying? So those are two separate things.
Never said that part.
And also the situation.
From it.
No.
What they do, you coming by and then you go. Because of what they eat or what they do. You say, hey, how you doing? I'm gone because it's evil. What's going on? You know what I mean? Because of whatever you're eating or however you feel about what they do, you come, say hi, and I'm going as if coming by and hanging with your family or friends is going to cause a problem.
It's not about your friend. It's not about because that's also a common misconception. So I'm glad you said that. It's not about what they're doing. It's about what they're doing and its effects on you. Because if a person drinking and smoking weed doesn't affect me, I don't have that problem. But if I'm a person coming out of the world who once smoked weed or who once drank alcohol, and I know that that's something that's prevalent amongst my family, I'm not going to put myself in a position to where I'm going amongst a bunch of people. That's like being an ex-crackhead going to a crack house to see your buddy. It don't make sense, right? So
smoke, crack, or did weed or drink, or none of that.
Yeah, but that's my point. And that's what I'm saying.
You never did it, so it should be an issue for you anyway.
And what I'm saying is, I'm not speaking to those people who don't have that issue. I'm speaking directly to the people who do have that issue. You have to understand that we're not just speaking to you. We're speaking to a series of other people with a bunch of other.
Separate the two. Okay, you can and you don't. Okay, you can't say that people have a problem who I'm speaking to. You're talking about people who don't have a problem, and it's the same situation you're talking about. Whether they do it or they didn't,
we don't
or
speak
they are past tense.
We don't speak to logic. We speak to the scriptures, and the scriptures say not to tempt yourself with evil. So no matter how it is that you feel, that's not no. Wait, hold.
Because the thing is all about the spirit.
Hold on.
We're gonna shut it down because this. Don't end the broadcast because I have to give. We don't want to end it and not give context to the situation. Okay.
Go ahead.
So basically, speaking to that, It has nothing to do with you separating yourself from the family because of what it is that they're doing, right? Because what we have to understand is that according to the scriptures, Christ gave a mandate. Paul made it clear. I am all things to all men, right? That I may win them. If you can't just go into a situation thinking, well, because they're my family, I'm going to go amongst sin and participate in sin because they're my family. That's not how we do this.
I think it was also just misunderstood.
Exactly.
Being that the whole point of this was to around the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying it's not like, oh, they're having a cookout and we're like, oh, we're not gonna come to the cookout.
Yeah.
Let y'all eat pork at the cookout.
Yeah.
It's more so like because it's a religious thing,
Mhm.
because it's a spiritual thing for you. It's like for Christmas and Thanksgiving, you don't stay because it's like a ritual. That's
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you don't participate in that aspect. So that's what I was gonna say when he was here, because I think he like misunderstood.
Yeah.
We're not saying we don't come around family because people do what they do.
Yeah.
But like we're saying, like for specific things, that's where you have to draw the line because you don't participate.
Exactly. And it's not always a situation where people think that just because we're in the truth, we can't know people that aren't in the truth. That's not you can't get rid of a brother because you can't get rid of your brother or your sister because they're not in the truth. That's somebody who's tied to you, right? That's your family. That you don't get rid of your family because they don't believe the same thing as you, and you definitely don't admonish someone because of what they believe. I don't know if I made that clear when I said that you don't go into somebody else's house and disrespect their house. You can't go into someone else's house on Thanksgiving and say you shouldn't be in pork. You shouldn't. That's not how we operate. The scriptures say to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves.
The thing about it is, even before us coming into the truth, none of us knew the history or paid too much attention to the history behind the different holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you know the history
Mhm.
and your family doesn't know the history, you know that religious-wise or by law that you're, or by history that you're or they're worshiping other gods.
Mm-hmm.
And by knowing that truth, you can't, really shouldn't be partaking in it like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then about the food thing, they're celebrating Christmas most of the time, unless they're vegan. They got the rib or the ham hock and all that kind of stuff like that. So
And some people aren't aware of what that there's pork in certain seasons.
Exactly.
And certain like Jiffy cornbread.
Mhm.
So like if we come over there and we're eating pork.
Exactly.
Like, you don't want to be like a stickler like, okay, well what did you put in that? Oh, what did you put in that? Because they're gonna feel judged. So it's better that I just
Don't eat at all.
Like,
And-
like come over and be like nitpicking everything. Oh, you got pork in that too? Oh, you got pork in that? Like
because you're offending them at that
Exactly,
point
and
when you do that. So you look around. Like if I go to somebody's house, I just scan around. They offer. I can't eat stuff anyway, so that helps me out a whole bunch to not offend them because they know. But you scan around and you know for yourself that like she said, it's different cornbread.
Mhm.
You got pork in it. So I mean, as you see the example, changing somebody's way of life
Exactly.
like they've been living,
Mhm.
it's very, very difficult because they're brought up like that.
Exactly. And I'm going to read verse 27 in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 one more time. It says, if any of them that believe not bid you to feast. If any of them that believe not bid you to feast, and ye be disposed to go, which means that you have time to go. Go and eat whatsoever is placed before you, asking no question for conscience sake. So if somebody who's not in the truth invites you to a cookout, go if you want to go. Go. Now keep in mind it says all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. So all things are lawful for me, right? And all things are lawful for you. Now if he's an ex-alcoholic and I'm not, right? And I know my family is full of alcoholics, it's going to be alcohol there, and I don't have that problem, then all things are lawful but not expedient. It's not going to have an effect on me. But since he's an ex-alcoholic and there's going to be alcohol there, it's not smart for him to go. Even though it's lawful, it's not expedient. You see the difference? You can separate the one from the two because it can apply to different people in different ways. Not everybody's the same, right? So when we say that on Thanksgiving not to go, or we say Christmas not to go, and we say Easter not to go, we're not saying that you disassociate yourself from your family altogether. If somebody comes down and you want to go see them and they're having a cookout, go. It's not related to a religion. It's related to a family time, right? But all things are lawful but not expedient. You have to understand what it is and what it is you can possibly fall to if there's something there that you can possibly fall to. And that's what we have to have the understanding of and being wise when we go into these situations. We're not telling you to separate yourself from your family altogether or to not deal with your family altogether because they eat pork. Right. But what we are saying is that you shouldn't eat pork, right? Or that you shouldn't partake in unclean food. It's not saying here that whatsoever is set before you eat is talking about all kinds of food, because not everything is food. It's saying that you are to go, be respectful of the people that's there, and eat what's clean. I'm not saying that you go to somebody else's house, a cookout at somebody else's house, and tell them how they should be eating.
I wanted to say too that he was asleep during the part where you was talking about the worship of other deities and the history behind these holidays.
Well, that's what
He was sleeping, so I think he came to when you were talking about disassociating yourself after you've gone through Thanksgiving and saying, hey, this, that, and the third, then you know that I can't participate or I won't participate with you during Christmas time because you are aware of what that holiday means.
Exactly. Thanksgiving is more so for our people. It's surrounded more so with family as opposed to the religious connotation. But the reason we don't celebrate is because of the religion. That doesn't mean that if they invite you to come see family, that you don't go see your family.
Yeah, but that's the sneak attack.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
They brought us up with the family and crossing them both together. So people got that strong emotional attachment. And it's so badly, as you see, that they can't see anything else.
Exactly. And that's why the scriptures say all things are lawful but not expedient. Right. It's not a good idea for everybody else. If you know that you have some type of serious emotional attachment to the holiday season, to Thanksgiving, then it's not a good idea for you to go.
I would recommend, like, there's ways around it if you want to go that night before the person leaves. If you want to meet with them
the next day or something like that.
Come the day of.
Exactly.
Like, most of the time they probably be there the night before. So stay the night before, sit, hang out a little bit, or if they leave the next day, let's leave the next day before they maybe you want to keep driving to the airport or something like that. Like a nice gesture so you can spend time.
Yeah.
But there's ways around it.
Exhaust your resources. And that's that's when it comes to being wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. If you're smart about the situation and you can figure out, well, I know my grandma's there, but she'll be here tomorrow, so I'll come by and see her tomorrow. Or if there's a situation where, she came in the day before, I can go and see her the day before, or I can go see him or such and such the day before. Exhaust your resources, right? Being wise, right? But what we have to understand, especially as people in the truth, this is not about being self-righteous. Fact of the matter is that the scriptures say that we are supposed to correct people in meekness and in love. So if you're coming at like he mentioned with the story where she ordered whatever she wanted, she pulled out her Bible. If somebody invites you to come see your family and you go in there and see your family and you whip out a Bible on everybody, you're wrong. You're in the wrong. We are not to we're not Muslims. We don't force people to convert. We allow people, we tell them once, twice, 3 times, and then we don't speak about it anymore. We let our life be an example. And guess what? The family always comes back around. Nobody ever had after we haven't been to Thanksgiving since we came into the truth, but don't nobody have a problem coming to see us the day after. If they're down here. Right? So this is not just to be clear, this is not saying that you are to excommunicate your family because they eat pork. This is not saying to excommunicate your family because they celebrate Christmas or Thanksgiving. But we as a people having the understanding of what gods are behind these holidays cannot allow ourselves to advertently or inadvertently participate. Right?
That's right.
All right. Do we have any questions to close out? Questions or comments?
I think everybody's going. Oh, sir.
All
I
right.
don't see anything here.
So if that's all, we want to give all thanks and praise to the Most High, Ahaya Bahashem Yeshaya Wabrawat, for continuing to bless this church, bless this body. We want to say shalom to our brothers and sisters in Sierra Leone. Bless you. We pray that you all have a blessed Feast of Dedication. Come next week, we're going to do the lesson on the Feast of Dedication. So.
Yeah, and also, send our greetings, our love out to our brothers Isaac, Calvin, Lubens, all y'all brothers that had to go home to be with your families during this time. Bless you all.
And safe travels for everybody.
And our brothers over there in Sierra Leone. Bishop Michael, Elder Johannes, Shalom, bless you all.
Everybody have a blessed Feast of Dedication, 7-day feast. Make sure you feast, decorate, do whatever you want to do. Have some fun. This is a feast week. So without any further ado, we will say Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
Shalom.